Welcome to this installment of Open G tuning. The previous video was on D standard, where we tune all the strings down by a whole step as compared to standard tuning. So with this particular tuning, we're actually tuning to a chord, in this case a G chord. So you can grab other chords, like say your G chord, C chord, D chord, and then back to G on top. Having a hard time borrowing today. My recommendation is to make sure you got a fresh set of strings on your guitar. So be sure to tune your guitar. Clean strings, brand new strings is the way to go for any kind of open tuning. And if you want to stay in any kind of open tuning, have your guitar set up so that it can handle the new tension. Tension of the strings will change depending on the tuning. So what we have here is we have our open strings, and it's tuned to a chord. Like I mentioned before, the chord is G/D. That just means that the D is your lowest note in the chord. And as you move up to the next chord, here you have a C chord. This actually happens at 5th fret. You can do the first finger barring all the way across the strings. The D with the A in the bass, 7th fret for that chord, straight across. And there you have it. G, 12th fret, it's going to be barred straight across again as well. E minor is your next chord. There's two different ways of voicing this chord, and you can see underneath the letters of the diagram what's in the chord. E, G, and B are the notes that spell out your E minor chord. So as you go along, you can see what's in play here. A, C, and E gives you the A minor chord. B minor with a D in the bass, B, D, F sharp. All of these chords, by the way, are in the key of G. So in the neck diagram, we have the fretboard diagram, excuse me. All of the notes here are in C major. There's no F sharps anywhere. So I chose to go with the key of G, the 6 chords, G major, A minor, B minor, C, D, E minor, and F sharp minor. I don't think is actually in here. So what I chose to play through is a 1-4-5 progression in the key of G. So we have a G chord, we got our C chord in here, we got our D chord, and then for the minor chords, I chose to just keep it E minor and A minor with different variations. B minor's in there too, actually. We have like a 1-4-5 in E minor, A, and B being the minor chords in the key. So that's what I chose to choose for your voicings in the chords. And you can see there's some really weird looking hand shapes. There's some other shapes that look like sort of similar, like this one here. The B minor with the D in the bass looks like a D7 chord. So it's not that at all, actually. When you go to play it, it sounds different. Really nice sounding chord. So there's some really good stuff in here you can play around with. This G chord. I can move that shape around the strings, the shape here, and get major chords all across the board on these assigned strings. So if I take the shape, move it down, I get an F chord. If I move it 2 frets higher than where it is now, I get an A major chord. So there's some really cool stuff in here, especially if you're trying to write songs and you're kind of stuck. Tuning the guitar differently really kind of helps you get out of the rut. Other chords that have open strings, like the E minor, there's 2 versions of the E minor chord that you'll see along the way, that one and also this one on top. Very similar, I just added the first finger on the bottom. So a lot of these shapes derive from what's in each chord, you know, so that's the thing. With B minor, it was B, D, F sharp, so wherever those notes are on the fretboard, which if I bring that back in, we can actually grab where all the F sharps are. They'll be 1 fret higher than where the F is. And you can see it's in red right now. That's where F sharp is. So when I play the D chord with the F sharp in the bass over here, this chord has the F sharp in the bass, 4th fret on the D string. And if you go to your diagram, there it is. That's the 4th string, 4th fret, F sharp is there. So that's where the lone sharp of the chord voicings is. And also with the D chord, we have the F sharp on top on the 1st string, 4th fret. Nice sounding chord voicings in here. These 2 chords are identical. The F sharp is just changing position from the D string. And also with this chord, we have it on the high E string. So I chose to open up that D string. Now in terms of tuning, you can see that they only include, or what's included in the score is just 3 strings. These strings are the ones that are affected. The low E string, the bottom E string is affected. E goes down to D. The A string, which is string 5 right above, goes down to a G from an A, and then the high E string, top E string, gets down to a D. It's tuned down to a D from E. So normally with altered tunings, all the strings that are affected are on the side here. So we're just changing 3 strings only which leaves the D string alone. The fourth string stays at D, G string stays at G, and the B string stays at B. If you play just those three strings, as you can see here, D, G, B, I get a G chord. So like I mentioned earlier, I chose to keep everything in the key of G. No key signature for the score. The main thing before you start anything is where now we can talk about the tuning. Showcase all 6 strings, and then you get some tuning pitches. So let's play that so you can tune your guitar before we do anything. So feel free to rewind back if you want to hear those tuning pitches again. Just scroll on back and you can pick up from wherever you want to tune your strings to. And of course, if you have a guitar tuner, then you just use your guitar tuner. Measure 7 gives us the first G chord. So this is what I showed before in the fretboard view, and you'll see what notes are being highlighted as we play through the chords. So let's take it from this measure here, and let's see everything is lit up, open strings as reflected in the tablature, and you have your notation right above that. So you have your D, G, D, then you got your G, B, D. G, B, and D spell your G chord. So let's hear that, and we'll hear the rest of it too. So everything's showcased. Look at the fretboard view. You'll see what's highlighted and what you have under your finger. Play that chord again. The fretboard view is in the way. Okay, so I chose to go through just the major chords first, the G to the C to the D, the 1, 4, 5 using major chords. The 1, 4, 5 just means that each chord, the 1 would be the starting chord, the beginning chord, 4 would be the chord that's 4 letters away from the first one, and the 5 chord is 1 past the 4 chord, or 5 chords or notes away from the first chord. Same thing with the E minor, A minor, B minor, same function, just with minor chords. The 1 chord is E minor, the 4 chord is A minor, the 5 chord is B minor. And you can hear the very first E minor chord, you can make preferences in terms of what chords you want to hear, in terms of the voicings. I could choose that 6-string voicing of the E minor chord, or just that, you know. So you have a choice on texture. If you want a fatter sound, all 6 strings will give you that. If you want more of a thinner sound, take away a few strings. That gives you this E minor chord in here. So you can hear the differences with each chord voicing, what happens. You can choose whatever chord you want to play around with from what's on top here. The nice thing about any kind of open tuning such as this, you can deviate from what's already here and just do whatever you want. It always starts with the foundation. You want to start from some kind of place, and then you can mix and match the different sounds. One thing I was playing around with, sort of the E minor chord voicing here, this one right here, I was kind of playing around with it and including some of the open strings on the bottom, just for the sake of doing so, you know, because I have a certain chord shape or appearance here. E minor is more specific because we're playing it here, and I was doing some messing around, playing around with different things, different kinds of intervals. So as you go and play through the score and try out these chord voicings, the next step would be to just deviate from the material. Then you get more into a creative mode, which is really good. So the E minor voicing, for instance. So fingering wise, I'm playing middle finger on the D string, ring finger on the high E string. And I just moved it up, including the A string on the bottom, which is actually tuned down to G. So I can move this shape around. The E minor shape started out as 4 strings, and if I want to, I can include the bottom string. You get all these really interesting sounds. That's the thing with open tunings, is that you deviate from, of course, the standard tuning. So you get some non-conventional chord voicings, which is great if you're really at a point where you're stuck and you're trying to write something. Change your strings. I chose to do 3 strings to achieve the open string tuning. With the previous video, D standard, all the strings got dropped down a whole step, as I mentioned in the beginning of the video. This chord voicing here is, it's going to be the C with the G in the bass. And the G is right here. What that means when you see chords like that in the top of the score, C, G. So I decided to go from a C, G chord to a D, G chord. G being the lowest note, so it would be written as a D chord, which is actually not quite a D chord because we have that note right there, an F sharp and a G. So it's more like almost like a major 7th chord. And then I chose that E minor shape again up here. So I didn't name these chords, but I'm actually just playing around with the sounds, and then later on I can go back and see, okay, what did I just play, you know? So I'm still playing with that E minor shape from earlier, but including that open G as a pedal tone. It sounds funky there. So that's the thing that's really exciting, is when you start to play with the tuning and get into all these different sounds. It gets pretty exciting. One chord I was playing with earlier looks like a C chord. You play a C chord shape down here. That's how it sounds in this tuning. So you can make adjustments to that. That doesn't sound so good. I don't like that either. So what's causing a problem is that open B and E string. That sounds a little more interesting. That sounds horrible. So that's the thing that's really cool, is that you start to play with these different motives. Like right there was one I was doing earlier. So you get some really interesting things start to build in. And you get to a whole plethora of all these different sounds and textures. Play around with the material that's here on top of the page, playing around with any of these guys. You could take any of these shapes. This one here, the A minor E. We have A, C, and E being the heart of the A minor chord. E is the lowest note in the chord. So if I take that shape and play around, so I got an A minor going to a B minor, which gives me a different offering. You know, I got a C minor, D minor, E minor. I can throw a G in there, that G open 5th string. So I got an A minor with a G in the bass, which is actually, if you throw a G in there, it gives you A minor 7. So I could just move the shape around without using open strings. Then I can go, what if I include open string? What does that sound like? So you can choose to grab any of these 2 strings and open it up. If I do that, this is what I get for this chord. If I take the 5th string tuned down to a G from A, I get this chord called C6, which is the G, the lowest tone of the chord. The 6 could be viewed a couple different ways. In this particular chord voicing, the 6 isn't really there. G would be a 7th. A minor, E, whatever you want to do with it, it's completely up to you. Some of the other chords that are chord forms, the D, F sharp is a great chord form to move around. You may even go so far as taking the shape and moving it over one string to see what that sounds like. That could be interesting. So there's lots of options that you have with these. This one, you're pretty much locked into this down here, unless you take out the open strings and then you can X out the fourth string in this case, and then right hand would skip this string if you want to. That way your first string can actually go across and kind of knock into this string and knock it out. So you'll get a chord voicing if you do that. That's a form. You can move it around your neck and do whatever you want. This one here, the G chord, I covered that earlier. Any of these are great to start with, you know. If you want to move around the bar shapes, you can do those. You can do partial bars. I mean, it's absolutely endless what can happen here. And that's really the point of having these open tunings. Having these open tunings really gives you options, and you can take things away, add things in, go with a certain set of strings. You know, you can minimize the amount of strings you want to play. You can skip over strings. I mean, it's crazy. Add fingerstyle technique into there, different picking patterns, your strumming. It goes the gamut. There's so many possibilities that you have here with this particular tuning. And it's one of many. Like in the previous video to this I mentioned, that's one other tuning. Dadgad is a very popular tuning. Tuning your guitar to a chord is not as bad. So it really, for this particular one with open G tuning, just like in D standard, it just involves dropping a few strings to get the desired chord, in this case, the G chord. You could tune your guitar to a C chord if you want to, or a C minor 7 chord. It's ridiculous. So if you know the spellings of the chords, you could tune your guitar accordingly and affect whatever strings you want, as many or as little as you want to. Sometimes just changing one string can give you a whole other landscape to the instrument. So there it is. But check out any part of this video, you can go back to the very beginning and pause the screen, check out the chords on top of the page, and go through those, get a heads up on them, get really comfortable. Your tuning pitches are in here, so you can go into your tuning pitches and stay there for a little while, get your guitar set up, make sure your strings are fresh. Mine aren't particularly fresh. I recommend doing that. But I was busy writing earlier, so I didn't really change my strings out. So that's not atypical of any guitar player. So, but anyway, to really do it right, get the strings changed, get a nice fresh set on there. If you want to stay in the tuning, like I mentioned earlier, get your guitar set up so that it can handle the different tensions on the strings and on your neck, so the neck doesn't do anything weird. If you enjoyed the video, please feel free to like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care.